review of rate model developed by J. Stowe Group. B, water rate assumptions and proposed rates. C, sewer rate assumptions and proposed rates. D, set dates for public hearing, rate adoption, and effective date of rates. Item A first. One of the Jims.
Yep. I just made it, thank you. Here's a pen I did give everyone. This is the new print. We just wanted like to get something read ahead of time to, as way of background before we turn it over to Jennifer. So I'd like to read this into the minutes. The Mud One Rate Committee report to the full Mud One board, and I have a copy for each of you. Forward. In 2014, Trophy Club Mud One adopted a new set of water and sewer rates based on a 10-month study and eventual recommendations from J. Stowe and Company, one of the leading consultants in the state of Texas, and helping municipalities and mud districts analyze and set proper water and sewer rates. Their recommendations were based on methodologies established by the American Water Works Association, AWWA, and rates that are adopted by the state's regulatory agency, TCEQ. The methodology selected by Trophy Club Mud One used cost of service to determine rates based on customer classes. In Trophy Club, we have 3 customer classes: residential, commercial, and out of district. The Stowe study provided a 5-year framework and a very in-depth, intense model for future use as the district so desired. Entering the second year of that proposal, the Mud One board set up a rate study committee to reevaluate the original information and ensure the best possible information was developed for the full board as it determines what rate structure needs to be adopted for the second year. Today's report has been developed by that committee and is being submitted for the full review and subsequent approval by the full Mud One board as it determines which set of new rates best accomplishes all objectives. Factors used by the committee. First and foremost, the revenues generated must be sufficient to pay for all water and sewer expenses and should be established so that the district can start to build up a buffer of reserves in these areas. The overall process must treat each customer class fairly. The Stowe model was used by the committee as it already has the proper breakdowns of fixed versus variable cost percentages for every line item in the water and sewer budget. Costs are higher for this next year for multiple reasons, and the new rates must be set to cover these increased costs. Objectives set by the committee. We decided that the 2 major objectives from the rate setting of 2014 were still paramount. Number 1, to minimize the overall cost effect on low-volume users, as we felt a large percentage of these are retired homeowners in Trophy Club, and many may be living on a fixed budget. And number 2, to use sewer rates to complement our efforts towards overall water conservation. The recovery of $927,000 in reserves this next year was established as a major objective, and rates need to be set accordingly. Based on recent history, $300,000 was allocated for capital water projects and another $300,000 for capital sewer projects. In the water rate, the base rate should cover all fixed water cost. Multiple approaches were investigated with the final objective of seeing exactly how each approach affects the 2 major objectives carried over from last year. The approaches being brought forward for full board review and approval. Using the Stowe model and the objectives stated above, the committee is recommending one specific approach to water rates. That approach will be shown within the general manager's presentation. Concerning sewer rates, the committee decided to broaden its evaluations as much as possible and selected 4 different approaches for the presentation to the full board. Number 1, continue with the Stowe numbers, keeping the sewer cap at 18,000 gallons. Number 2, winter averaging. Number 3, no cap on sewer cost. Every account pay for sewer cost based on each account's total use of water. And number 4, divide the total sewer cost by the total number of meters, charging each meter the same amount each month for sewer cost. Staff was asked to prepare 6 views of all 4 approaches, comparing each view to our current rate cost and presenting them such that they can be compared against each other for the full board's review and eventual decision. In each approach, the overall cost for water and sewer are recovered by the rates established for that approach and reflected in the 6 views for that approach. The views for residential usage include 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000, 25,000, and 30,000 gallons. Please note that we have a number of residential accounts that use in excess of 30,000 gallons monthly, but the committee felt that these 6 views would provide sufficient information as they cover the majority of our residential customer base. Just be aware that the larger volumes in excess of 30,000 gallons will generate additional cost to those customers in several of the 4 approaches. The views for commercial usage include 25,000, 50,000, 75,000, 100,000, 125,000, and 150,000 gallons. The final data prepared by the committee will now be presented by our General Manager, Ms. Jennifer McKnight.
Jennifer?
All right, Jim, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Jim sent me his write-up, and I said this sounded fine to me.
Okay. All right, well then I will get started with the presentation. All right, well, Jim did a good job of kind of introducing what we were looking at in the rate model or the rate study and kind of where we went, and we'll kind of go through the results of everything that we looked at. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is you all, back in February, we kind of talked about starting up this review and setting a timeline. So I've kind of updated that timeline to show where we're at and where we're going. Of course, today we're in the workshop, and we hope to get some recommendations and set a public hearing date. I would like for us to try to set that public hearing date by July at the very latest, and then the board could consider final adoption of the rates at the July meeting to have an effective date of the rates for September 1st of 2015. What that means is the customers would actually see them on their October bill, the bill that they get the first part of October. As Jim talked about, we have some primary goals when we first developed our rate model. Of course, first and foremost, we have to meet the financial needs of the district. We want to promote water conservation, and we want to include a lifeline rate, which is very common, and it is for low and fixed income residents. And we also want to prevent rate shock for all of our customers. We used the model that was developed by J. Stowe Group, and I think we will continue to call them J. Stowe Group forever, but I would like to point out that they've merged and they're now called New Gen Strategies. So the first month we got the bill, we didn't even know who it was. So
I apologize, Jennifer. I couldn't find the name. I was going to put it in my.
That's fine. So, but the model that they developed incorporated the board goals at that time. It was developed per American Water Works Association cost of service methodology. And as I've kind of told you in the past, there are many methodologies that are approved, many different ways of setting rates. But this is the methodology that I think is the best, and it's really the most commonly used method. Rates for water are based upon cost for treatment and distribution by customer class, residential and commercial. We also actually have a third customer class, which is out of district. But our rate model charges the way charges go to out of district is they're charged 15% more. So we didn't really include them to show them, but any rates that we have, the out of district class pays 15% additional. Rates for sewer are based upon the cost for collection and treatment by customer class, residential and commercial. So I kind of wanted to point out, a lot of times we get focused on water treatment and sewer treatment, and we forget about which side of the equation, the actual distribution of the water going out to our customer, that's included in water rates. The collection of the wastewater or the sewer lines, that's included in the sewer rates, maintenance of those things. The model projects our revenue requirements over the next 5 years. As you know, I am adamant. I believe that you should look at rates every single year, and we've committed to do that. It's nice to kind of see what the model thinks things are going to look like out in 5 years, but reality can sometimes be a little different than the model. So we need to take real numbers that we know, things like changes in the Fort Worth water costs, things that we really can't predict very well if it's going to be 3% or 28%. So we need to look at that every single year. Costs are allocated for fixed and variable expenses for both water and sewer. And the cost of service is considered by customer class within the model. When we were looking this year at our water rates, some special consideration we had to give was an increase in the wholesale water costs. Not only looking at an increase that we got in 15, but one that we expect in 16. When we did the rate study last time, we were looking at 14's budget projected for 15. It was the first year we used the model. It took a little bit longer for everybody to get a full understanding of how it works. So we actually were one rate increase from Fort Worth behind when we adopted the rates. So this year's model makes up for that and also projects for 16. We're also looking at trying to do a recovery of reserves that will be expended for the Fort Worth Regional Water Line and for the water system study. There's been significant increase in the cost of materials and supplies, especially in the distribution system. We have increased sampling and analysis. The majority of that is for the PID, in that for the first 5 years of a new water system, there's a lot of additional sampling that has to be done. After a 5-year period, you can request certain reductions in sampling, but it's only going to increase for that 5 years till they get their baseline set. So, and the cost of analysis has dramatically increased. I was talking to a lady with a lab at a meeting recently, a lab manager, and I asked her, why are your costs going up so high? And I thought it was interesting. It's one of the same reasons we have. She said the cost of their chemicals, the reagents and things, are really going up, so they're having to pass those on in their costs. We're also including this year an annual reserve amount for the PID elevated storage tank, future maintenance. The board had decided a while back that we have maintenance contracts on all of the tanks within the mud. We cannot get a contract like that on the PID elevated. So we're dividing what we estimate the cost of the 10-year full maintenance over a 10-year period. So 1/10 of that future maintenance is included in this projected budget. And also capital improvement projects for FY16. I've allotted $300,000 for water, and as you'll see in a moment, $300,000 for the sewer side. Some of the factors that were considered in the sewer rates, of course, the revenue bonds. We have the new debt service. We have a reserve that we have to meet over a 60-month period, and we have coverage requirements. Remember that our rates have to be 110% less depreciation to cover debts, our costs in the sewer side. That's a bond covenants. We recently did the RFP for sledge hauling, and we've approved that starting for October, and you saw that those rates increased dramatically for our sledge hauling. Just like on the water side, the costs of supplies and materials, especially for the collection system, have increased. Additional sampling and analysis, and a lot of that, we also have the permit renewal for the wastewater treatment plant in FY16. The permit itself does not actually expire until 17, but you must have your permit application submitted to TCQ 180 days before its expiration. So about mid-16, we have to get that submitted to TCQ for approval to get the permit renewed. There are a lot of sampling and analysis that has to be done as part of that permit renewal. And the permit renewal itself is very costly. I know y'all have done this a lot of times over time, but you have to have an engineer certify your application. So we'll have to pay some engineering fees. A lot of work has to be done on that submittal. So those costs are projected in 16. Also, as I said earlier, capital improvement projects or purchases for 16, the model's looking at allotting $300,000 on the sewer side. On the water side, some of the assumptions, we wanted to maintain the tiered pricing for water conservation. That is a TCQ recommended rate structure, and we've been using that for as far back as I can see at Trophy Club. You've used the tiered increased pricing. The higher the usage, the higher the tier rate. We also wanted to start moving closer to the AWWA meter equivalency base rates. It was interesting, just yesterday I was going over the presentation with a staff member from the town, and the question was, how long has that meter equivalency base rates been in effect? And I said, I think that's been kind of since the late 90s. So we looked it up, and to my disbelief, it was actually in 1991 that was approved. So we're a little behind the curve on the AWWA standards, so we definitely want to keep moving towards that. But again, we don't want to cause rate shock, so we're going to just kind of inch towards it over some years' time. But what that means is we should be setting to get true cost of service for the customer class based on their meter size. That's another a subsection of customer classes. 5/8 inch meters are considered our 1. And the flow for a 5/8 inch meter is 20 gallons per minute. A 1 inch meter is 50 gallons per minute. So as you can see, the AWWA factor is 2.5 times. So in other words, if your base rate for a 5/8 inch meter was $1, you should be charging $2.50 for a 1 inch meter. And those increase as you go up. As you can see, a 6 inch meter is actually 50 times the flow of a 5/8 inch meter, meaning they need 50 times the capacity in your system. So in your customer classes, on the water side, you should be breaking that out. So in the model, we're moving closer towards that without going completely there yet. We're planning to continue this over time. Of course, we also talked about we wanted to try to include a recovery of those expended and committed reserves that are supposed to be part of our reserve for the policy the board set to stay within 25 to 35% of our fund balance. So we dipped into that a little bit, so we need to try to bring that back up. We also included $300,000 for the 2016 CIP on the water side. So that's some of the assumptions that we used. When we ran all of those assumptions, put the numbers into the magic model, what came out was for the base rate for the 5/8 inch meter to go up to $12.99. And you can see the rates going on up, filtering on up from there. A 1 inch would be $20.39. 1.5 inch, 32.23, 2 inch, 46.43, 3 inch, 79.58, 4 inch, 126.93, and a 6 inch, 245.29. On the volumetric rates, the 0 to 6,000 gallon tier went up about 33 cents to 303. Next tier, 353. Next, 409. Next, 475. And a top tier of 552 per 1,000 gallons. As Jim said, the committee asked us to do some comparisons. I had sent these out to y'all a little earlier, but as you can see, we calculated what your current bill right now, if for water only, if you used 5,000 gallons, your current bill would be $26.21, and your new bill on the new proposed rates would be $28.14. So that's a difference of $1.93. And you can see going across, it goes from 5,000 to 30,000. So at 30,000 gallons, they would see an increase of $12.75 per month on their bill. On the 1 inch meter, the 5,000 gallons would see an increase of $5.33, and 30,000 would see an increase to $16.15. On a 2 inch meter, 2 inch meters, we don't have any residential 2 inch meters. That's kind of where we start with commercial. And at 25,000, we did 25, 50, 75, 100, up to 150. So at 25,000, they would see a $18.24 increase. At 150,000, they would see $92.24. So the sewer rates. I said we kind of had some radical committee members, and one wanted to see at this end of the perspective and one wanted to see at this end of the perspective. So it was actually very interesting, and I was very excited about kind of getting a chance to look at that. We kind of looked from one end to the other of the spectrum. So what we've called scenario 1 is status quo, and that is the recommended model by our rate consultants from last year, which was with a sewer cap, and the cap set at 18,000 gallons. That is for residential. On commercial, there is no cap. So the first scenario we're looking at is no change to our structure at all. The base rates came out to be from the $14.58 current base rate to a proposed of $15.35. Volumetric rates went from the current rate of $2.50 up to $2.63. That's for the first scenario. The second scenario was at the other end of the far end of one of the spectrums. That would be what would happen if there was no cap for anyone. And I want to back up and say that any one of these that we're looking at are acceptable AWWA methods of rate setting. So these are all something that are allowable by AWWA, which translates to allowable by TCQ and the PUC. So any of these you could choose to approve.
Jennifer, can I also add, there are pros and cons associated with each one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we were working on the model with the consultant last year, we tried to look at what we thought was the best model for Trophy Club, knowing what we know about how rates are set and looking very closely at our user groups and just kind of getting a feel of what is best for our community. That's how we came up with the model we did originally.
Can you just state what direction we gave Stowe Group to go in last year as far as water conservation and minimal impact?
Yes. What as I said, when we developed the model, we had some goals and objectives, and we wanted to maintain water conservation. That was a primary goal as well, both on the water rates and the sewer rates. We want to encourage water conservation. The least amount, or the less amount customers use, the costs are just exponential that are saved. It's not just a matter of the amount of water you buy from Fort Worth, say. It's the amount of capacity you need in your system, number of tanks, number of chemicals. Over on the treatment side, collection lines. If you're discharging more water, you have to upgrade collection lines to get to the wastewater plant. So it filters a lot more than just what the water you're buying or treating. It goes across the whole system. So water conservation really impacts a system in a beneficial way. So we wanted to make that something we were doing. Also, we wanted to maintain a lifeline rate for low users, and we also wanted to make sure that the impact was fair across the board. We didn't want one group to have a higher impact than another group. That's not really possible to not impact anyone differently, but we looked at what would have the most, I guess, stable across the board impact on our customers, and it was the model we came up with is a sewer cap on the sewer side. So now looking at the second scenario, which was no cap, leaving the rates exactly as they are is what we could do. It actually generated a surplus of about $475,000. So with no cap, where everyone is billed fully for what they consume on the water side, the rates would not change from what they are this year on the sewer side. The third scenario we looked at, now at the other end of the spectrum, is the winter averaging.
Jennifer, one thing, the rates don't change, but everybody over 18,000 gallons is going to pay more money because they got to pay for what they use.
Right. Okay, on the winter averaging, we use the residential rate set on their winter average for December, January, and February. That's 14, 15, and 15, December through February. And we maintained that the commercial side would still pay for full consumption. So the winter averaging was only looked at for residential customers. Going with winter averaging, the base rate would go from $14.58 to $19.10, and the volumetric rate would go from $2.50 to $3.28. The final scenario that we looked at was a flat rate, and this was just kind of thrown in at the last moment because as we were having discussions, I mentioned that flat rates are an allowable AWWA method. But what it allows is that you just take your costs for sewer and you divide it evenly among all connections, and that would make the flat rate $47.68 per customer per month. So that was about the extent of that discussion, but we did it, so we wanted to share it with the rest of the board.
Jennifer, I want to say something, and Bill, I think hopefully you'll appreciate this. We spent more time as a group digging into winter average and making sure we understood exactly how the numbers, propagate forward. We just spent a great deal of time looking at that.
Okay, so now I did kind of a rate comparison on sewer, and it was difficult to try to say current this scenario, so I just grouped them together so that you can see on a 5,000 gallon usage, the sewer bill currently would be $27.08. If you utilize the status quo model, that would go to $28.50. With no cap, again, the rates wouldn't change, so for that usage group, it would stay the same, $27.08. Winter averaging, it would go up to $35.50, and then the flat fee, $47.68. And that's kind of the last I'm going to say about the flat fee, okay, because it's going to stay $47.68 no matter what you're looking at. And as you go across the usage groups, you can see the difference in each scenario for 10,000, 15, 20, 25, and 30. On the 30,000, kind of skip to that end. The current bill right now is $59.58. $59.58 is the maximum you pay on sewer right now because it's capped at 18,000. So with the current bill, that's what they pay. With status quo, that would go up to $62.69 because the new maximum you would pay is $62.69. On the no cap, that would go up to $89.58. For winter averaging, it would go up to $117.50, and I'm not saying flat rate. So. Okay, so what then I wanted to look at is kind of what would an annual bill look like for different types of customers. And so I broke it down in the small 5/8 inch meter, a real life customer. Each of these are real life customers that were selected from our utility billing. I looked at kind of where everybody was in each overall usage group and tried to come up with what I consider the low guy, middle of the road, and then the super user. So right now we're looking at a 5/8 inch meter at a home that has no irrigation system. And you will see that their total that they used for the year, all the gallons that they used added together, was 44,000 gallons. That gives them an annual monthly average of 3,667 gallons. Their winter average was 2,333 gallons. So if you go to the bottom, you can see what their annual utility bill would be or is and would be. In other words, what they paid for water and sewer on the current rates was $556.28 for the year. If we move to the status quo scenario on sewer, their bill would have been $560.98. With no cap, it would be $546.02. With the winter averaging, it would be $582.06. And with the flat sewer rate, it would be $833.22. The 5/8 meter with an irrigation system, you can see the difference is their annual monthly average is 7,000 gallons, winter average 5,000. As you go across the board, their current bill $778.99. Status quo, that would have gone to $831.68. No cap, it would have been $811.39. Winter average would be $849.93, and the flat rate $996.09. The 1 inch meter with an irrigation system, this is kind of getting to our mid-range user. Both of those are considered mid-range. The other is a 5/8 mid-range, and this is a 1 inch mid-range. Their annual usage was 180, monthly average 15,000, and winter average 4,333. Their current bill $1288.23. Status quo, that would move to $1429.94. No cap $1498.44. Winter average $1287.78, and the flat rate $1460. Next, I used a super user, and I do want to say that I tried to get kind of an average super user, meaning someone kind of right about in the middle of over an average of 25,000 gallons per month. I'm sorry, 30,000 gallons per month. So this individual used a total of 703,000. Their annual average was 58,000, and their winter average was 46,667 gallons. So their current water and sewer bill, 3,671. Water and status quo would be 4098. Water with no cap on sewer, 5278. Winter averaging 5411, and the flat rate 3917. So if I take all of those together and put it together This is kind of a layout of what everybody's bill looks like. If you're looking at to see what specific scenario has the least impact to user groups, you can see that the lower users, that's the no cap, because it basically doesn't change their bill at all on the sewer side, just a little on the water side. For the mid-range, it is the winter averaging, and mid-range larger users, I should say, the 1-inch meters. And for the super user, it would be the flat sewer fee. That kind of concludes my presentation. What we need to look at to make some decisions on today are what would you like to recommend for the water rates? Which of the scenarios would you like to see on the sewer rates, and what effective date? And within each of these, we can have discussion on if there's any assumptions you as a board would like to see differently and have us rerun the models. So that's where we are, and we will leave it to questions and discussion now.
Questions?
Can we hear the pros and cons if the committee actually weigh those?
Yeah, I'll offer some comments there. Let me get Jennifer's last page there.
To a great degree, Kevin, if you pull out the rate comparison sewer, the numbers themselves almost give you the pros and cons. But we'll go over them with you.
That's dealing with prices.
Right.
That's financial to the end user.
Right.
What's the pros and cons as far as water conservation, minimal impact? Obviously, you can see the financial.
But again, I'm saying you'll see how the low users are impacted financially, and the high users, which is one of the things that we tried to consider.
Well, one thing I want to say about the current system, we not only considered the relative cost to the customer of each system, but we also made a big deal out of fairness. And I have always thought that treating customers at the 18,000 level differently than you treat customers above the 18,000 was not a strong point for fairness. So I think caps of any kind are difficult to justify from strictly a fairness situation, because you don't treat all customers the same. So that's what I would say is a drawback about the current system, but it's permissible under the AWWA. So it's a system that would pass a PUC challenge. So it's okay from that standpoint. Just from the standpoint of wanting every customer treated the same, it's not strong on that item. So that's what I would say about the current system. The system that says let's have no cap, what I would think are some considerations in that area is that we recognize that system bills customers for water that doesn't go to the wastewater plant. They use it on their yards. So it's not strong on the standpoint of trying to measure what goes to the wastewater plant from each customer. However, it has this set of circumstances that says everybody gets treated the same, and in rate setting for sewer, the number one starting point is always cost. What is going to cost us to run the sewer operation? So in that regard, even though you bill a sewer billing for water that goes on the yard, all you're doing is taking the total cost, which is the number one starting point, and you're dividing it by something that treats everybody the same. If you want, it is a strong impetus toward conservation, because if you want to use 60,000 gallons, you're going to pay for 60,000 gallons. Now, it's all divided into total cost, So it is not unfair from the standpoint that the cost is divided by something that, even though it doesn't represent all what goes to the sewer plant, it does represent a fair picture of everybody gets treated the same according to the amount of water they buy, and so that is an acceptable way also. The winter averaging, I have always resisted winter averaging for this reason. You take a medium customer, say a 20,000 user, and the differential between his winter averaging and his actual average creates an amount of money. That amount of money is greater than the amount of money on a winter averaging low volume. You just said, let's say you had a 2,000 winter average and a 5,000 total average. He only gets the benefit of 3,000 gallons, but the guy, so therefore his savings is only 3,000 to go to winter averaging as far as average water use per 1,000 gallons. The big guy, or the medium-sized guy even, he has a far bigger differential between winter averaging and total averaging, and therefore he is going to get the better deal out of winter averaging. He's going to realize more savings than the small guy. We don't want the big guy to get more savings than the small guy. In fact, we would like to see it the other way. So I think that is a significant detriment to adopting winter averaging. So that's kind of what my general comments would be.
Neil, I'm sorry, Jim, can I add one thing too? If you look at, I want to kind of point everybody to this handout, where it shows the rates, and I can put it back up on my presentation. I'll go back and do that. But if you notice, as you go across on the user groups, the highest increase for all from 5,000 to 30,000 is on the winter averaging scenario. And I'll go, I think that was one of the slides. I'll bring it back up. Yes, there we go.
Now, did I understand you to say the winter averaging is causing the bill to be higher?
Well, with the exception of the flat fee on the lower ones, but
Yeah.
if you look at the current bill for 5,000 is 2708, and with winter averaging it's 3550. For 10,000, 3958 versus 5190. For 15, 5208 versus 6830. For 20, 5958 versus 8470. So it actually is the largest increase across the board.
Yeah, on mine, which I'm probably in the lower user, but my annual increase would have been 8232, so that falls in line with, about that number.
If I could add a few more comments, Kevin, to your question, or Neil, would you like to talk first?
Well, first of all, I want to commend the committee and Jennifer. This has been a pretty excellent presentation today. I also want to commend you for using real customers so we could see what the real world is versus a abstract. When you were looking at this data when it finally came out, I was curious, what surprises did you see as a committee?
Oh, it was several. That's what I'm fixing to talk about. It was several.
Well, take out the flat rate fee. What surprises did you?
Well, matter of fact, Neil, let me just address flat rate real quick. When you look at the numbers on the sheet of paper, when you cross past 10,000 gallons, flat rate is very, very effective.
Yeah.
Problem is at 10,000 gallons, that represents 27, 37, 45%. 45% of our residential customers
Yeah.
fall into 10,000 and less. I mean, almost half, but 45%. So really and truthfully, the flat rate impacted too many users on the low end. So although we looked at it and said, man, as you climb up in the spectrum, it really looks good, it's got a huge impact on the bottom side. So we said, based on our two parameters, probably not one that we would say you ought to go with. But still, we wanted to give you the data. If I can back up for 1 second and say a couple of things. Renee and Terry were just phenomenal. I mean, y'all just can't imagine how they can manipulate. I mean, and Neil, they manipulate numbers on that and that thing like crazy. You'd love it. The one thing that hit me, and I do want to point this out, I became phenomenally impressed and appreciative of the money we spent last year. That Stowe model is a jewel. You know, the base of it is proprietary. You can't have it, but the base of it, these people can take every single line item of a budget of anything you can possibly dream of, and they come up and they break it down within their model of what percent of that is fixed cost and what percent of that is variable cost. And I operated for the longest time thinking that a number was a number was a number. Well, it's not. There are certain things that have to get split up different ways based on how they're used, and that model does that. And so what you can do in the model, which is so slick, is you take the numbers associated with these 4 scenarios that we picked, you plug them into the model, and the model generates this for you. It tells you what the numbers have to be. What you have to give it is your cost. And we did that. We did the cost. We did the revenue recapture of 927. We did the 350 on the two sides. You plug all your cost numbers in, and then you tell it what you want it to do, and that booger bear just spits this stuff out. And it was very, very effective. Now, having said that, when you look at the status quo, we had a lot of conversations about this cap of 18,000. And, you know, the cap of 18,000 is what you had to have to generate the revenue you had to have in order to pay your cost. Because the bottom line is, it doesn't matter which one of these 4 you go with, you must recover your cost. And so you tell the model what your cost is, and you tell the model how you want to play it, and the model gives you the numbers that recovers your cost, which is what we did. So in the 18,000, as Jim said, there was an awful lot of conversation about that. Was that really fair? Because really and truthfully, it was in my mind, it was an arbitrary number that was picked because it generated what we had to have, you know, to make it work, and there was a presentable and fair, because we had to have a price increase last year. We had no choice. Well, we're faced with that again this year. Our costs are going up. Particularly, we've got to start paying off the bond, the revenue bond. That's a cost. We've got monies we have to recapture. That's a significant figure. And when you look at the cost of the capital improvements, those are significant numbers. So you build all that into this thing. So,
And I wanted to say about 600,000 for the bigger line running between that Westlake and Trophy Club had to pay for from Fort Worth.
Yep.
and the other thing, by the way, that you do is
But that's water, though.
Yes, I didn't mean it was sewer. I meant
I mean,
On the
I'm
water
sorry to
side.
interrupt you, Jim, but I think consensus is everyone agrees the water, it is what it is. I mean,
Right.
we have a price increase, so
Right.
we're pretty much focusing on the sewer portion of it.
And yeah, Kevin, and basically, what we talked about as far as the water went was, should we capture our reserves quickly, or should we capture our reserves over a prorated period? And when we looked at the criticality of the reserves, we felt very strongly as an entire group that the reserves need to be captured as fast as possible. You know, and so that we did that. We recaptured the reserves this next year. So that was on the water side. That was the big decision to be made in water, and we spent a lot of time talking about that. Now, with that out of the way, we're only coming back to you with one proposal for water rates, and it accomplishes all of those objectives that we've pre-established. Now, on the sewer side, that is where we spent the gargantuan amount of time. And when Jennifer says there was 2 ends of the spectrums, there were 2 ends of the spectrum. I mean, there was a huge amount of discussion on no cap, and there was probably even more discussion on winter averaging. We looked at this backwards and forwards and dug. Now, I want to point out something to you. The other thing that the model does is it captures, on a cost allocation basis, it captures what the numbers you have to derive from your various classes are in order to be fair and equal to those classes. And so, didn't bother to bring in the commercial numbers, but I would just tell you that the commercial, under all of these scenarios, are paying their fair share of the load. And so, with that having been said, when you look at status quo says it's probably the easiest to go forward with because our residents have got it. They're already paying it. They understand the 18,000 cap. They understand. I think they will understand if we publicize it properly that our costs are going up and therefore the rates are going to have to go up. So that one probably becomes the easiest to explain. The no cap will be kind of tough, quite honestly, because when you get past 18,000 gallons, you're now paying more money. And we have over 35% of our residential customer base is over 18,000. 35%. A lot of people use a lot of water in Trophy Club. Those people are going to pay more water because they were capped before at 18,000. So you have to come up with some reason to explain that to them. So pro is what Jim said. It is absolutely a fair way to go about doing it. If you're trying, if water conservation is what you're trying to drive, which we said that is one of probably our major objective, use sewer rates to help drive water conservation. If you do that, the most dramatic way to do that is take the cap off. Let everybody pay for what they use. Because I promise you, my wife and I sat down and played with it last night, and we said under these 4 rates, if the Bud Board goes with that one, we're going to really have to give some serious thought as to what we're doing. So, because we are obviously over 18,000 gallons. When you look at the last one, I think I've covered flat fee. When you look at winter averaging, I got to admit, I was very, very surprised and to some degree shocked when I actually looked at the numbers. And I got to tell you, I've spent a lot of time looking at this. I'm kind of the emotional mindset that says you shouldn't charge people for water that they're putting on their yard. I mean, I kind of moved over in that thinking, but at the same time, you got to recover your cost. And so what happens, if you think about this, you have a cap at 18,000. Winter averaging in Trophy Club is 9,200 gallons on an average. Now, it's up to every house. We got one house in Trophy Club. Winter average number is 47,000 gallons of water. One house.
Don't mention my name, okay?
But the bottom line is, if you're just talking in terms of averages, the average in Trophy Club is 9,200 gallons. We got a cap at 18,000 gallons, and you have to generate this much revenue at 18,000 gallons. When you crank your cap down to 9,000 gallons, you still have to generate this much revenue, and you have to do it by raising your base and by raising your volumetric cost of water. And when you do that, that becomes the numbers you see on this sheet of paper. And folks, I got to tell you, emotionally, I love the idea of not paying for water I'm putting on my yard, but at the same time, this is going to be a hard explanation because it's more expensive.
Well, I think, Jim, if you look at your customer C, I mean, you're talking about current bill right now is $1,288.
Which one, Neil?
Customer C, the 1/8 meter.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And when you see what you calculated with winter averaging, is there actually $1 difference? I mean, so that's immaterial.
Yeah, and by the way,
Versus the benefit the customer A and B would get.
yeah, and keep in mind, all of the new homes in Trophy Club, that includes the PID, Hogan's Glen, all the stuff going in back by the sewer plant, they're all now 1-inch meters. The older homes in Trophy Club, the ones that basically represent, I guess, the old base, if you will, those are all 5/8-inch meters.
Again, I want to commend you guys for using real customers because again, it's a way of looking at things. But I want to jump to the water side. Besides the cost of water, when we're talking about recapturing for the reserves and the amount of money that we also have to set aside for when the Fort Worth water line is complete, we have to pay that bill. What were those amounts approximately?
Jennifer, you may have that better than I do.
The reserve amount we're recovering, is that your question?
Yeah.
929,000.
Okay.
It was about 835 for the water line and 100 for the, or 94 for the water study. So it was
And Neil, it
929.
did include both those things you just mentioned.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
plus then 300,000 for future capital improvements.
For FY16 capital improvements
It's
specifically.
350 on the water side and 350 on the sewer side.
We did look at if we divided the recovery over a couple of years, and it didn't really make a huge difference because most of the recovery is in the volumetric rate. So it doesn't. If you don't sell the water, you're not going to make the recovery as quickly. But then if it impacts the rates less to do it that way, I guess is what I'm getting at. So when we looked at dividing it over a couple of years, 50% and 50%, it really wasn't beneficial to anyone to divide it over the time. We looked at it over 2 years and over 4 years, and the committee felt like just going ahead and recovering it in this rate increase was the better way to go. And then we also expect that to stabilize any future rate increase. It won't be included in there year after year after year. It's just this 1 year. So when we're looking at rates next year, we've already got the rate set to cover that amount that's not in there. So it could stabilize the rates over a longer period of time.
And Neil, I was wrong a second ago. It's 300,000, not 350.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to, commend the committee. I mean, this is good information, and most of all the staff, Jennifer and the staff, for the time and the effort they put in this. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world where everyone does the same exact thing over and over again. I pay school taxes. I don't have any kids going to school, but that's how it is, On the water, there's people that use 3,000, during the winter, and then in the summer they go up to maybe 17,000, like myself. There's people that use 3,000 or 4,000 in the winter and jump up to 50 or 60,000, and they say, "Oh well, it's the water." There's no way that much irrigation is going on in their yard. So obviously they have pools or something like that, and I don't stand behind the theory, oh well, the difference between what I use in the winter, the difference is all irrigation. That's not true. So you have people. We set the cap at 18,000 based on the last Stowe group, when they were the Stowe group analysis, and we could have kept it at 12 at what it was before, but the base rate and the volumetric would go up. You have to get the money somewhere. If you put it at 18, anybody over 18, that maybe it's because of irrigation, but then maybe it's not. They're pretty much getting a free ride as far as the rates going through there. So, I mean, as far as trying to come up with something that's fair to every individual, it's impossible. And this board looks at, okay, across the board, what has the minimal impact and what is fair for everyone, and still gather a revenue and keep the plant operating at the highest level. We have a plant renovation going on, so we have to account for that in the rates. So again, I think this committee did a excellent job in putting everything together, and we have to look at what's fair across the board, not specific groups or anything like that, and minimal impact to the residents.
And Kevin, this sheet, I think, does probably the best job of that, which is, you see in the yellow that Jennifer's done, it's the scenario with the least impact by user group. And, the no cap, if everybody pays for what they use, has the least amount of impact on your low and your mid 5/8, which represents about 45% of Trophy Club. The winter averaging is best for those 1-inch meters that are in the mid-range, which is kind of your PID and your Hogan's Glen area. And the guy that's using the 47,000 does a lot better if you go flat with him.
Yeah, and another question I had is, I mean, there's been, people, I'll call it bashing or degrading the Stowe Group, or AKA New Gen Strategies. In your analysis of this, you mentioned it earlier, but I just want to bring it up again. And these are experts in the field. Do you agree with that?
Well, if you see how when you get a chance to see how that model works, that thing's insane.
So
I mean,
you
it is
would
so
consider-
detailed. I didn't understand it even until we got into these committee meetings. That thing looks at everything. And it breaks it down into percentages and details, and if you were to sit down and try to do that yourself on a line item by line item basis, you're talking about months and months and months and months of effort.
Okay, so you would consider them very knowledgeable in the field. That's their expertise. And what I'm getting at is you can come up, anyone that has a computer can come up with numbers, but until they do the thorough analysis that these people have done, you're comparing apples to oranges. You
Well,
all
that's how
agree
they
with
make
that?
their living, so yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Please keep in mind, I didn't look at the group, I looked at the model, but it is their engine, so.
Does the committee come up with a specific recommendation?
Can I say? No.
Go ahead.
No?
Well, it wasn't our job. You told us to give you some options so that the full board could talk them out. Now, Jim, I think it's fair to say, you lean to no cap. I think it was fair to say that in the meeting I leaned to winter averaging. I think that'd be fair to say. But when you look at the rates, when they finally came out of the model and we finally got to see the end result, you just got to look at these rates and decide as a team of five which you think has, number one, the least impact on our folks, and number two, quite honestly, the one you're going to have to go out and explain to our residents what we're doing and why we're doing it. I don't care which model you go with, because prices are going up, therefore rates are going up, and so you just got to decide which one of these you want to go talk about.
I think the person with the best handle on it is probably Jennifer, and I'd like to hear if she has a recommendation.
Yeah, for kind of breaking it down for the water side first, I think that the committee does have a recommendation on that, and that is the what we've presented today, that as Jim said, the big changeable, I suppose, assumption is the recovery. We believe that it's best to go ahead and do that full recovery for many reasons, to get it done and to stabilize the rates over time.
That is very correct. We as a group totally recommend that approach for water.
So on the water, I would say the committee and myself recommend the rates that we presented today. On the sewer side, there's one thing I want to that I think Jim said, and he said it in a different way, and it was something that I kind of explained to the committee from the very beginning. Jim Thomas, I know, just start saying your last names, I guess, but when he was talking a few minutes ago, and that is, when you're looking at sewer rates are really only driven by two things: flow and quality. Our quality in Trophy Club for our sewer is the same. It doesn't matter what class you are. We do not have industries, fish manufacture or fish processing plants. We don't have the types of commercial places that have a huge impact on quality of wastewater or strength. I don't like calling it quality, even though that's what AWW, because I don't find that to be very good quality. I like to call it strength. Okay. But so really our sewer rates are driven by flow. That's the big difference in every one of these scenarios. That's the change the assumption that you're changing in the model. So on the status quo, we use by user, user group or user tier, this much usage is in 1,000, 2,000. That's all put into the model, and on the status quo, the flow was about the same as it was previous years. When we're looking at averages of years, and the status quo, the flow was about the same. So the difference of the prices was the cost of increases. On the no cap, the flow was much higher. So it has an adverse reaction on the rates. The higher the flow, the lower the rate. The lower the flow, the higher the rate. And that's rate setting on the sewer side in Trophy Club, because quality's out of the equation. It's all driven by flow. So on the no cap, we have higher flow, rates stay lower. Winter averaging, you have much lower volume that you're setting rates on, so your rates are driven higher. That was one of the things that we looked at when we set the model up all together. How to keep rate increases stable. That's part of the board's goal of rate shock, preventing rate shock. So my opinion, and I told this to the committee, and I say this sincerely, I can give you the technical reasons. I can tell you how the model works and what's going to happen if you do this or that to it, because I've done it a lot of years. But I can't tell you what's fair. You're the governing board, and you oversee you have to decide on behalf of your constituents what you think is fair. But in my opinion, what is fair is status quo, because it has a stable impact across the board. It doesn't make one person's rate increase much higher than somebody else's, but it allows some recognition of, we believe some of your water may be going on the ground, but if you want to get your rate down at 18,000, use 17. You're going to save $3 and whatever. So I think, in my opinion, the status quo, having a cap, is the fairest to all customer groups, all customer classes in Trophy
Jim.
Club.
Jim?
Okay, yes.
It would be very fair to say that Jim and I were diametrically opposed in looking at this. And by the way, both of us were right. Neither one of us were wrong. We were looking at it for.
And I really want to say that is the truth. Neither one of them are wrong. And I've worked at districts where our City of Houston had no cap. I've had a district where we had winter averaging, and for those communities that worked great. That's how they felt it worked the best. So
What Jennifer just explained to you was, in the meeting, I probably wasted an awful lot of time because I was on a path associated with winter averaging. I was on a path of saying fixed and variable costs, sewer, fixed and variable costs, fixed and variable costs, because I'm thinking water side. And I'm trying to take the water side of how things work over to the sewer side. It doesn't work that way. And I finally, Jennifer found the right words that caused the light bulb to go on in my head. When you go look at your sewer cost and try to break them down on a line item by line item basis, the vast majority of your sewer costs are fixed. They're not variable. On the water side, you got the vast majority of your costs are variable, and you have some fixed costs. So when we finally did that, and I backed off of my howling, we got into running the actual numbers, and I will tell you that after the numbers were now the committee did not have a recommendation for you. Personally, now Jennifer just took the thunder out of what I was going to say. Personally, after I looked at this, the one that has the best price differential throughout Trophy Club as a whole, and the least amount of impact on everyone throughout Trophy Club as a whole, is to stay with the status quo, 18,000 gallons. And so, just personally, when it comes up for vote, that is where my vote is.
Yeah. Okay, can we,
I got one more.
go ahead.
Yeah, I heard that she did like a head slap to you to kind of.
She did more than one.
But again, personally, I agree with Jim Hayes. I mean, pay what you use, because I'm one that is under 18,000 all the time. So but personally, I'm not on his board to do things personally, and I agree with what Jennifer and you just said, Jim Thomas, that status quo is probably the fairest way. It might not be fair to everybody, but
Yeah.
as a district, I think it's the right way to go.
And Kevin, I want to tell you, I actually agreed with Jim, even though I was taking the other view. I agreed with him from the standpoint of.
Now you're building them up.
Well, now hang on a second. We really didn't fight. We were on different ends of the spectrum, but we were listening to each other, and there was a great deal of courtesy, and we weren't yelling at each other. I agreed with him, but the problem I had, I don't know how you go out to 50% of your residents and tell them you're fixing to jack their price out of sight, and that's what that does to those that are over 18,000 gallons. I don't know how you do that.
Well, I want to say too that I really liked the no cap as well, because it meant no increase. And from where we sit in here answering the phones, that's a good thing. But it was not only a no increase, but it was, to the rates, but it was also a surplus. So that was really nice. You could actually reduce the rates, I guess is what I'm saying. I
Don't
wouldn't
misunderstand
recommend that.
It was a huge increase
So
for those over 18,000.
You asked what my opinion was, and in my opinion, my recommendation would be to stay with status quo. But I definitely saw value in every single model that we looked at. Even the flat rate was I could see some benefits for that. That's pretty easy to explain to people. So I think they were all very good scenarios to look at. But again, I just felt like that the least impact across the board through all usage groups, and giving the recognition that probably some summer usage does go on the lawn and not to the sewer, that the status quo was the best way to go.
The biggest problem I had with flat rate is when you divide it by total number of accounts. We only have like 180 commercial accounts. We got 4,000 residential accounts, so it would be completely out of whack, fairness-wise. Commercial would no longer be carrying anywhere near its weight of the cost, and so that was my big reason for being against it.
Jim,
Neil?
I'd like to make a motion regarding the water rates.
Great, that's where I wanted to get to.
Before I do, I've actually thought of making another motion regarding for Jim Thomas, that since he seems to be a high user, we should convert his meter to a commercial meter.
I'll take it.
Okay?
I think I'm going to get a sprinkler meter.
And I want to commend Jim Hayes, because I think he's shown a lot of patience in dealing with his committee member on this committee. So I think that's
Yes, he definitely did. A lot more than I did at some points.
You wish to make a motion?
Yes,
Director?
sir. I'm going to make a motion that under Table 1 on the water rates, as in our packet, that we adopt that for Trophy Club Mud 1.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on water rates? If there's not, let's call for the vote. All those in favor? It is unanimous.
I'd like to make a motion regarding agenda item 1B, or 1C, excuse me, the sewer rate assumption, proposed rate. I'd make a motion that we adopt the water rate as status quo.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion, any comments or opinions before we take the vote?
Obviously, Jim and I were aimed at other approaches, but I came to the conclusion that in my mind, that's the best way to go.
Okay.
I'll just add that, again, we're very impressed with the effort of the staff and the committee members in putting together this presentation. It's a very detailed presentation, and we appreciate it.
Right, we're extremely comfortable and appreciative of the work that was done on this. This was, since I've been on the board, we've never examined anything to this degree and given this consideration to anything as much as we have this. And so the staff's work and the committee's work is extremely appreciated by the rest of us on the board. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. There's no further discussion. We'll call for the vote. Those that are in favor? It is 4. Those opposed? Director Hayes.
By the way, the only time it got a little dicey is I made the statement, now that you've presented the Democratic view, I wanted to show the Republican view. At that moment in time, it got a little dicey. Yeah. And I was just teasing.
Okay, item D, set dates for public hearing, rate adoption, and effective date of rates. Jennifer?
Okay, so what I would like to suggest is we could, in order to get this in place by September 1st, which is what I would recommend our effective date be, you all will need to, set a public hearing for, you could do it in June and July, or just do it in July. We are not required to have a public hearing, but I certainly like to do that so that customers can come in and see and look at the rates that we're looking at going into place September the 1st. So,
We do it as part of our next Trophy Club Mud meeting,
Sure, we can do it,
public meeting first and then go to our regular session?
yeah, it would be, we would do that. It's really just part of citizens, right after citizens' presentation, we could do that. So do you want to have one in June and July, or do you just want to have one?
I mean,
One public hearing you're asking about?
Yeah, one or two public hearings. One.
I don't think it hurts us to have two. I mean, we could have one and then maybe if it was the sense of the board after this June meeting that we need another one, we could say we'll do
Sure,
another one.
we can do it that way. So we'll just set it for June.
would y'all-
And
what do y'all think about, there's no way around this, guys. The cost is the cost. It is gonna drive the rates up. We need, in my mind, we need some type of explanation to the community as to, it's something that's clear and concise and not something I write, that explains to them why we're doing what we're doing. And
yes, we will definitely be sending out notices. We'll come up with a letter that we send out like we did last year, that we send out to all the residents, probably include something in the water bill. We'll have the bills that go out at the end of June, and we'll have the bills that go out at the end of July, and we'll have the bills that go out at the end of August that we can get information out. We'll put things on the website. So staff and I will start working on drafting up something to let people know and invite them to come into our public hearing.
But Jennifer, I would appreciate one thing. And guys, I just make this statement. I will tell you that Jim and I and the five of us, I mean, we tore this stuff apart every way you could personally tear it apart. And there wasn't any prejudicial thoughts one way or the other, although I might have been somewhat prejudiced to winter averaging and Jim was prejudiced to no cap. But I mean, we tore this thing apart literally. So Jennifer, whatever we publicize, I'd like for the community to know that we looked at this in depth at a number of different ways and came up with what we felt was the best way.
Sure. And that was actually a reason that I was kind of go back and re-suggest that maybe we do just make the public hearing at the July meeting. That'll allow us some more time to get information out to customers that we're going to have a public hearing. We can certainly do both and have one in June and then have another one in July.
Well, that's what I was thinking when you were talking about that. Maybe we're putting too much on the staff right now to be ready for June. Maybe we're better
Yeah.
off to do it in July.
Right. And I tell you, all you got to do is look at that one sheet of paper that does the analysis, and it becomes fairly intuitive really, really quickly that one method is financially is a better approach for everyone.
Prior to my prior suggestion, maybe have the first, or maybe the only public meeting on this at our just before our July.
Everybody agree on one public meeting prior to our July meeting.
That way we have all the time to put together all the
Yeah,
information.
I think that's fine.
Okay.
That's good.
And actually, that works out good. That will be when we have our public hearing on the CCR. So they can come hear all the water stuff they want to hear at one meeting. So that would be good.
I want to say one thing, Jennifer, about the staff work. Jennifer has a way of organizing the data in a very understandable way, but the thing that shocked me was we would play what if in these meetings, and Terry would click a few buttons, and 30 seconds later we saw the impact across the whole scope of the problem, and it was amazing to me that
That's what that model lets you do. But also, it's knowing how to use it. I mean,
Yes, that is a big part of it. It really is. So.
Jennifer, a date for rate adoption.
Yes, and the reason that is especially important, we must give the town 60 days notice of our effective date so that they will have time to, redo their order or their ordinance, rate ordinance in their case. And so my suggestion again is September 1st, and if you all approve an effective date today, we can go ahead and get that out to the town.
Okay. Any disagreement on the September date for the rate adoption?
it's September 1st, right?
That's correct.
For the rate
any
adoption.
reason for doing that versus our fiscal year of October 1st?
It will be in the October bill that the customer will see it. So
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, we're okay on public hearing rate adoption.
like to make the motion for these rate changes that we prior approved to be effective on September 1st, 2015.
We have a motion, we have a
Second.
second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's not, all those in favor signify, and it is unanimous.
Okay, when we have these hearings and public hearings and also adopt it, are you gonna go through and just double check everything else, like the added district rates and things like?
Sure, I will include the out of district in the presentation. I'll
Go
kind of
through the whole thing
update it.
as far as deposits and all that, just to make sure we don't need to change anything else. Do that, or is that?
That's kind of a different, we are going to be looking at the service policy as a whole and looking at those things, but I don't think we will have that done by July.
Okay, is any other discussion? If not, the meeting is hereby adjourned at 11:22 a.m.